The Villani Trade Coalition was dying. Their beautiful blue-green worlds, once bustling with merchant ships and peaceful trade, now burned under the relentless assault of the Draxan Empire. For 3 months, the Draxan war machine had swept through Villani space like a plague, consuming everything in its path. Communications Officer Kira sat in the last functioning command center on Villani Prime, her 6-fingered hands trembling as she watched the tactical display. Red dots representing Draxan battleships outnumbered the few remaining Villani defenders by 10-1. The end was coming, and everyone knew it. "All defensive positions have fallen," reported her commander, his voice hollow with defeat. "Maybe 6 hours before they breach the planetary shield." Kira's antennae twitched nervously as she prepared to send their final distress call. The crystalline hegemony was their only hope, their ancient allies who had promised to come if the Villani ever faced extinction. Her clawed fingers danced across the communication console, encoding the emergency frequency that would reach across the galaxy. But fear makes people make mistakes. In her panic, watching the Draxan ships grow larger on the view screen, Kira's hands slipped. Instead of transmitting on the hegemony's secure channel, she accidentally sent the message on an open frequency, one that shot out into unexplored space toward a small yellow star system. The message traveled for hours through the void before reaching Earth's outer monitoring station. Lieutenant Hannah Kim was finishing her night shift when her console lit up with an incoming transmission. She had been monitoring deep space for 2 years and had never seen anything like it. "What in the world?" she muttered, putting down her coffee cup. The transmission was clearly artificial, but the language was completely unknown. Strange symbols scrolled across her screen, accompanied by audio that sounded like musical tones mixed with static. Hannah ran the signal through the universal translator, but it could only pick up fragments. Words like help, dying, and extinction came through clearly enough. The emotional tone was unmistakable. This was a cry for help from somewhere far away. She immediately contacted her superior. "Sir, we've got something big here. This isn't a natural signal." Within an hour, the message had reached Admiral Minho Park at Luna Command. The Admiral was a veteran of the Titan Wars, a man who had seen humanity's worst conflicts and understood the value of peace. When he heard the translation, his decision was instant. "Prep the Third Fleet," he ordered. "Full battle readiness." "We don't even know who sent this or where it came from," his aide protested. Admiral Park looked out at the stars through the command center's massive windows. "Someone out there is dying and they asked for help. That's enough for me." The Villani never expected an answer to their misdirected plea. But as their world's final hours approached, space itself seemed to tear open above their planet. 27 sleek human warships emerged from hyperspace, their hulls gleaming with unknown technology. The dying Villani couldn't believe their eyes' help had come from the most unexpected source, Captain Jiwoo. Lee felt her heart racing as their small shuttle approached the massive Villani command ship. The alien vessel looked like a floating mountain made of dark metal, covered in strange glowing symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. Through the shuttle's windows, she could see dozens of smaller alien ships surrounding them, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. "Remember everyone," Jiwoo spoke calmly to her team. "We're not here to fight. We're here to talk." Her voice was steady, but inside she knew this moment would change everything for the human race. They were about to meet beings from another world, and nobody knew what would happen next. The shuttle docked with a soft thud. As the airlock opened, Jiwoo took a deep breath and stepped into the alien ship. The hallways were enormous, clearly built for creatures much larger than humans. Strange blue light came from panels in the walls, and the air smelled like metal and something sweet she couldn't identify. When they reached the main meeting room, Gu's team stopped and stared. The Villani were incredible to see. They stood, nearly 12 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished stone. Their eyes were large and golden, and they moved with surprising grace for such massive beings. But what shocked the humans most was the look of complete confusion on the aliens' faces. The Villani commander, who introduced himself as Thane, looked down at the small human delegation with obvious bewilderment. He spoke in a deep rumbling voice that their translation devices struggled to process. You are not the Crystalline Confederation, he said slowly. You are something else entirely. Gu stepped forward, trying to look confident despite feeling tiny next to these giants. We're humans, she said clearly. We received your distress signal and came to help. Thane's golden eyes widened. But you are so small, so young. Your ships are primitive by our standards. We sent our message to the Crystalline Confederation, the most advanced civilization in this sector. There has been a terrible mistake. Other Villani began speaking rapidly among themselves in their own language. Jiwoo caught words like error and impossible through the translator. She realized they were discussing whether to send the humans away. Commander Thane, Gu said, raising her voice to get his attention. I understand there's been a mix-up. You thought you were calling someone else. But we're here now, and we came because you needed help. Thane looked down at her with something like pity. Young human, you do not understand. We face an enemy that destroys entire star systems. People have barely learned to travel between planets. We cannot ask you to fight our battles. You're not asking us, Jiwoo replied firmly. We're offering. The room fell silent. The massive aliens exchanged glances, clearly struggling to understand what they were hearing. Thane shook his great head. This makes no sense. Why would you risk your lives for strangers? Gain nothing from helping us. Could simply return to your world and pretend you never received our message. That's when Sumin Choi, the team's translator and cultural expert, stepped forward. She had been working frantically with her translation device, trying to find the right words in the Villani language. Commander Thane, she said, speaking slowly and carefully in broken alien speech, humans have old saying, very important to us. Thane leaned down to hear her better. What saying? Sumin took a deep breath and continued in her limited Villani vocabulary. When someone calls for help, good people answer. No matter who, no matter danger. If you call, we come. This is human way. The alien commander straightened up, his golden eyes studying each human face. You would risk your entire species for people you have never met. That's exactly what we're doing, Jiwoo said simply. The silence stretched on for what felt. Like ours? Finally, Thane spoke again, his voice softer now. I have lived for over 300 of your years. I have met dozens of different species across the galaxy, but I have never encountered anything like this human concept of honor toward complete strangers. Maybe that's why we're here, Jiwoo suggested. Maybe the universe needs someone crazy, enough to help, just because it's the right thing to do. For the first time since they'd arrived, Thane's expression changed. Something that might have been a smile crossed his stony features. Perhaps you are right, small human. Perhaps you are exactly what we need. The conference room aboard the Villani command ship had been transformed into something that looked like a detective's investigation board. Holographic displays covered every wall, showing battle footage, ship movements, and attack patterns. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered the tables where the human intelligence team had been working non-stop for 3 straight days. Taeyong rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of his 4th cup of coffee. Around him, his team of analysts hunched over their laptops and tablets, cross-referencing data that the Villani had collected over decades of fighting the Draxan Empire. The alien observers stood quietly in the corners, watching these small humans work with an intensity they had never seen before. This is incredible, whispered one of the Villani officers to Commander Thane. They haven't slept more than 2 hours. At a time, what drives them? Thane shook his massive head. I'm beginning to think we don't understand humans at all. Taeyong looked up from his screen and stretched his aching back. Okay, everyone, let's go over what we've found so far. He stood up and walked to the main display, where hundreds of battle recordings played in small windows. The Draxan have been using the same basic strategy for over 50 years. Ejin Park, the team's tactical specialist, joined him at the display. Her hair was messy from running her hands through it while thinking, and she had dark circles under her eyes, but her voice was sharp and focused. Look at this pattern, she said, pointing to a series of battle recordings. Every single attack follows the same sequence. First, they send in their heavy cruisers in a diamond formation. Then their fighters sweep in from the sides. Finally, their command ships move forward to finish off whatever's left. But that's how they've always fought, said a Volani captain, confusion clear in his voice. They are predictable, yes, but their ships are so powerful that it doesn't matter. That's where you're wrong, Taeyong said, pulling up another set of data. Watch this. He played a recording of a recent Draxon attack, but this time the display showed detailed ship movements and timing. See how their heavy cruisers always maintain exactly the same distance from each other? And look at the timing. Their fighters always begin their attack precisely 47 seconds after the cruisers engage. The Volani officers leaned forward, studying the patterns they had somehow missed despite fighting these battles themselves. I don't understand, Thane admitted. What difference does this make? Hai-Jin smiled for the first time in days. It makes all the difference in the world. They're not adapting because they don't think they need to. They've been winning with the same tactics for so long that they've become lazy. They're like a boxer who only knows how to throw one punch. But that punch has always been strong enough to knock out their opponent. Another team member, Min-Jun Lee, looked up from his computer. I've been analyzing their communication patterns during battles. They use the same command frequencies, the same timing for orders, even the same retreat signals. It's like they're following a script that never changes. But surely they must have some intelligence, argued a Volani tactical officer. They've conquered dozens of star systems. Oh, they're intelligent, Taeyong said, bringing up a new display. But their intelligence is focused on building bigger, stronger ships and more powerful weapons. They've never had to think strategically because pure force has always worked for them. Humans had been working so intensely that they hadn't. Noticed how quiet the Volani had become. Finally, Thane spoke up. In all our centuries of warfare, we have approached battle as a test of courage and honor. We meet our enemies head-on, matching strength with strength. But you humans see it differently. War isn't about honor for us, Hai-Jin explained simply. It's about solving a problem. The problem is that the Draxon are hurting people and destroying worlds. So we study them like we would study any other problem, looking for the most efficient way to stop them. You treat warfare like a puzzle, another Volani observed. Exactly, Taeyong nodded. And every puzzle has a solution. The Draxon have been successful because they've been fighting enemies who think like them. Civilizations that value honor and direct confrontation. But we don't think like that. Min-Jun pulled up a final display showing Draxon fleet movements over the past year. Look at this. They've been using the same supply routes, the same staging areas, even the same timing for their attacks. They're so confident in their superiority that they've become completely predictable. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Volani had been fighting an enemy they thought was invincible, but the humans had spent 3 days proving that. The Draxon were simply creatures of habit who had never been challenged to change their ways. So what do we do with this information? Thane asked. Taeyong and Hai-Jin exchanged a look. We teach them that their old tricks don't work anymore, Hai-Jin said with a grin. We show them what happens when someone fights back with their brain. Instead of just their weapons, Volani began to understand that they hadn't just found allies in the humans. They had found a completely different way of thinking about war itself. The alarm bells on the Volani command ship were screaming as the Draxon fleet appeared on their sensors. Hundreds of massive black warships emerged from hyperspace, there. Hulls covered in weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. The sight had struck fear into the hearts of civilizations across the galaxy for centuries. Commander Thane stood on his bridge, watching the familiar sight of approaching doom. This time something was different. Floating alongside his massive vessels were the tiny human ships, looking like minnows swimming next to whales. The human fleet was barely a fraction of the size of either the Volani or Draxon forces, but somehow their presence changed everything. Human Fleet Commander, this is Thane. He spoke into his communication device. The Draxon are beginning there. Standard diamond formation. We should prepare for honorable battle. The response came back immediately in the calm voice of Commander Boranam. With respect, Commander Thane, we're not going to fight them the way they expect. Trust us and follow our lead. Thane felt a chill run through his massive frame. In all his years of warfare, battles had always followed the same pattern. 2 fleets would face each other, announce their intentions, and then engage in direct combat, until one side was victorious. It was the way civilized beings conducted war across the galaxy. But the humans apparently had very different ideas about civilization. As the Draxan fleet approached in their perfect diamond formation, the human ships did something that made every alien observer question their sensors. They turned around and began flying away at full speed, their engines glowing bright blue as they accelerated toward a nearby asteroid field. "What are they doing?" demanded a Villani officer. "Are they retreating already?" "Cowards," growled the lead Draxan commander over the open communication channel. "These pathetic humans flee before we even begin to fight. Perhaps we should focus on the real warriors." But they noticed something odd. The human ships weren't just running away randomly. They were heading toward a specific part of the asteroid field, where the space rocks were densest and most chaotic. And they were broadcasting something on all frequencies, not words, but a strange mix of sounds that seemed to make no sense. Commander Namthane called out, "What is that noise your ships are transmitting?" "Just some music we thought the Draxan might enjoy," came the reply. And Thane could hear the smile in the human's voice. "It's a mix of heavy metal, electronic dance music, and recordings of construction sites. Our communications specialists thought it would be entertaining." The Draxan fleet followed the humans toward the asteroid field, their formation still perfect and predictable. Their commanders were probably laughing at how easy this battle would be. But as they got closer to the asteroids, strange things began to happen. First, their communications started breaking down. The chaotic noise the humans were broadcasting was interfering with their command signals in ways that seemed impossible. The Draxan had advanced technology that should have been able to filter out such simple interference, but somehow the human signals were getting through every defense. "Sir," reported a Draxan communication officer we're losing contact with, "our outer squadrons, this noise pattern is disrupting our entire command network." "Then stop listening to it," snapped the Draxan commander. "Switch to backup frequencies." The humans had anticipated this. Every time the Draxans switched frequencies, the chaotic broadcast followed them. It was as if the humans had studied every possible communication method and prepared countermeasures for all of them. Then the real surprise came. Just as the Draxan fleet entered the asteroid field, the human ships that had been retreating suddenly appeared behind them. But they weren't using any kind of advanced technology or secret weapon. They had simply used the gravity of the asteroids to slingshot themselves around in a wide circle, gaining speed and changing direction in ways that the Draxan hadn't expected. "Impossible," breathed the Draxan commander. "How did they move so fast without activating their hyperspace drives?" Commander Biora Nam's voice came over the communication channel, perfectly calm. "Physics, Commander. We just used the gravity wells of those asteroids to accelerate and change direction. It's a technique we call a gravity assist. We've been doing it for decades to send probes to the outer planets of our solar system." The Draxan fleet was now trapped. Their perfect formation was useless in the chaotic asteroid field, and their communications were still being jammed by the human noise broadcasts. Worse, they were taking fire from behind while trying to navigate through space rocks that moved in unpredictable patterns. "This is not how warfare is conducted," protested the Draxan commander. "Where is your honor? Where are your battle formations? You fight like pirates, not warriors. You fight like humans." Biora Nam replied simply, "We fight to win." What followed was unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. The human ships moved through the asteroid field like they belonged there, using the space rocks as cover and weapons. They would disappear behind one asteroid and emerge from behind another, always appearing where the Draxan least expected them. The Draxan ships, built for direct confrontation, struggled to adapt. Their massive weapons were designed to destroy enemy fleets in open space, not to engage in the chaotic three-dimensional chess game the humans had created. Every time they tried to form up into their traditional battle patterns, the asteroids and human attacks would break them apart. "They're not following any known tactical doctrine," reported a Draxan tactical officer. "They attack from impossible angles, retreat when they should advance, and advance when they should retreat. It's like they're making up the rules as they go along, because that's exactly what we're doing," Biora Nam said, having intercepted the communication. "Every battle is different. Every enemy is different. So we adapt." The battle continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Draxan fleet, so used to overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower, found themselves outmaneuvered. At every turn, ships that had conquered star systems were being picked apart by tiny human vessels that struck like lightning and vanished like ghosts. Finally, the surviving Draxan ships began to retreat. As they fled, one pilot managed to send a message back to the Draxan Empire. They fight like the void itself. No honor, no rules, just results. These humans are not like any enemy we have faced before. Commander Thane watched the battle's end, with a mixture of awe and confusion. The humans had achieved in one engagement what the Villani had failed to do in decades of warfare. But their methods were so alien, so different from everything he understood about honorable combat. "Commander?" "Nam," he called out. "That was remarkable. But I must ask, how do you sleep at night, fighting without honor?" The human commander's response would be remembered in Villani history for generations. "We sleep just fine, Commander Thane, because when we wake up, the people we're protecting are still alive. And sometimes that's the only honor that really matters." The ruins of the Villani colony stretched endlessly in all directions. Twisted metal and broken stone, telling the story of a world that had died screaming. Kira, the Villani diplomat, walked carefully through the debris alongside Colonel In Ho-yoon and his team of human soldiers. The air still smelled of smoke and destruction, even though the attack had happened months ago. 2 million civilians lived here, Kira said softly, her golden eyes reflecting the devastation around them. They were artists, teachers, children, learning to read. The Draxan gave them no warning, no chance to surrender. They simply began destroying everything. Colonel Yoon stopped walking and knelt beside what had once been a playground. The twisted remains of a swing set stuck out of the rubble like broken bones. His weathered face was quiet, but his hands clenched into fists. The scars on his arms, visible below his rolled-up sleeves, seemed to tell their own story. "I don't understand you humans," Kira continued, her voice filled with genuine confusion. "You travel across the galaxy to fight for people you've never met. Your ships are smaller, your weapons less advanced. You lose soldiers in every battle. Yet you keep coming back, keep fighting, keep risking everything for us. Why?" The question hung in the air like the dust that swirled around the ruins. Lieutenant Ah-young Park, who had been examining damaged buildings for survivors, turned to look at her colonel. She was young, maybe 25, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much war. "Colonel," she said quietly, "should I tell her about Seoul?" In Ho-yoon was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the broken playground. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I was 8 years old when the Corvani invaded Earth, not aliens, just another human faction that decided our resources were worth more than our lives." Kira's massive frame seemed to shrink as she leaned closer to listen. In all her centuries of diplomatic experience, she had never heard such pain in a voice so carefully controlled. "They came at night," In-ho continued, standing up and brushing dust from his knees. "No warning, no demands, just ships appearing in the sky above my city. My parents put me and my little sister in the basement and told us to stay quiet no matter what we heard." He started walking again, picking his way through the debris with the careful steps of someone who had spent too much time in war zones. The basement had a small window. I watched our neighbors' houses burn, and watched people running in the streets, calling for help that never came. I watched my parents try to protect our home until the very end. "What happened to them?" Kira asked gently. "They died defending people they barely knew. A family from down the street had hidden in our basement. 2, and my parents fought to keep all of us safe." In-ho's voice grew steadier as he spoke, as if the memory gave him strength rather than pain. "I learned something that day about what it means to be human. We don't abandon each other, even when it would be easier, even when it would be safer. We don't walk away." Lieutenant Ah-young Park joined them, her own expression distant. "My story's different, but the same. I grew up on a colony world that was attacked by raiders. We sent distress signals for 3 days before anyone came to help. 3 days of hiding, of not knowing if we'd live to see another sunrise. But someone did come," Kira observed. "Yes. Human patrol ships, that were outnumbered 10-1. They came anyway, fought anyway, died anyway, because that's what humans do. Young picked up a child's toy from the rubble, a small stuffed animal, that had somehow survived the destruction. They saved my colony, saved my life. When they were dying, you know what they said? Kira waited, sensing the importance of what was coming. They said, "Tell the others we held the line. Tell them we didn't let you down." Young's voice cracked slightly. They didn't know my name. They didn't know if I was worth saving. They just knew I was human, and that was enough. The three figures stood in silence among the ruins, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, In-Ho spoke again. "You asked why we fight for strangers. The answer is simple. We fight because we remember what it felt like to be afraid and alone. We remember waiting for help that might never come. We remember the sound of our worlds burning while we hid in basements and hoped someone cared enough to risk their lives for ours. And someone always did," Young added quietly. "Maybe not in time to save everyone. Maybe not in time to prevent the tragedy, but someone always came. Someone always cared." Kira looked at these two small humans, understanding for the first time why her people's massive fleets and advanced technology had been losing to them. "Your strength doesn't come from your weapons or your tactics." "No," In-Ho agreed. "It comes from the promise we make to each other. The promise that no one fights alone, no one dies forgotten, and no one waits for help that never comes. When you called for help, that promise extended to you, even though we're not human." "Especially because you're not human," Young said, carefully placing the stuffed toy on a piece of broken wall where it could be seen. "Because if we only protected our own species, we'd be no better than the Draxan. We'd be conquerors, pretending to be heroes." As they walked away from the ruins, Kira finally understood the secret of human strength. It wasn't their technology or their cleverness or their adaptability. It was their absolute refusal to abandon those in need, even when those in need were strangers from across the galaxy. Nobody should face that without someone standing beside them, Young had said. And as Kira looked at these two humans who had traveled so far to stand beside her people, she realized that this simple promise was the most powerful weapon in the universe.